I am not proud of what I am about to tell you, but if I want to share this story, I must be honest. For 10 long, painful years, I hated being a mother. There, I said it. This is something we are never supposed to say. We are not even supposed to think it in the darkest corners of our minds. But for 10 years, this was my life. From the moment my son was born until he turned 10 years old, my life was not a happy journey of motherhood. It was a never-ending fight just to survive. Try to imagine, if you can, a baby that never stops. Not for one moment, not for a nap, not for a soft song or the gentle movement of a rocking chair. From the second he came into this world, my son was full of wild energy and crying that could not be stopped. My early years as a mother were not spent writing down special moments or taking sweet photos for a book. They were spent in a state of always watching, always being ready, trying to walk carefully through the dangerous path of a child who seemed to be fighting against everything around him. For years, I lived in a fog of tiredness so thick I could not see the woman I used to be. I was beaten down. I was broken. It was not just the lack of sleep, though that was its own kind of pain. It was the constant, loud screaming that played like music in the background of my life. I was empty inside. I was like a ghost walking through my own kitchen, just trying to keep my head above the water. It was not until he started elementary school that the pieces of the puzzle finally began to come together, but the picture they made was scary. We found out that he was not just a difficult child. He was living in a world that his brain saw in a different way. He had autism, he had Tourette's syndrome, he had ADHD. 3 diagnoses at once. On one hand, I felt some relief. Finally, there were names for the storms that happened inside him. But on the other hand, understanding what we were facing was too much to handle. By that time, I was so empty, soul tired from years of angry outbursts and watching my home get destroyed, that I could not even think about the information. I was just tired. I was so tired. I look back on those years and I see a woman I almost do not know. I see a mother who felt trapped. I felt tied to a terrible, unpredictable situation that I never asked for. I felt completely unable to handle it. There were days when the anger inside me was so heavy I could feel it in my bones. I am ashamed to say this now, but in those moments of deepest sadness, I said I would leave him at the local fire station more than once. It was not a joke. It was a desperate cry for a way out of a life that felt like a prison. And where was my partner in all of this? Where was the man who had promised to stand by me through good times and bad times? He was there, in body. He gave us money, and I think in his mind, that was where his job ended. He worked until 4 in the afternoon. The moment he walked through the door, he stopped being part of life completely. While I was drowning in a sea of meltdowns, dirty clothes, and the heavy weight of a child who could not control his own feelings, my husband was on the couch. Every single evening, the scene was the same. The blue light of the television screen shone on his face as he escaped into a world of video games. He would sit there for hours, headphones covering his ears, yelling at strangers in a computer world, while his real world, his wife and his son, was falling apart just 3 feet away. I would go to him, tears running down my face, begging for just 1 hour of rest. Please, I would cry, just watch him for 60 minutes so I can sleep. Just take him for a walk so I can hear myself think. The answer was always some form of the same cold, calculated refusal. "I've been working all day," he would say, not even looking up from the screen. "This is your job. I did mine." His job ended at 4. Mine was a job that never stopped, day and night, with no breaks, no extra pay, and no one to speak for me. Even as the clock moved toward midnight, I was the one folding the clothes, cleaning the burnt food off the pans, and making the careful schedule for the next day so our son would not have a complete breakdown. I was the one doing the delicate dance of bedtime, a process that could take hours of patience and emotional work, while the sound of my husband laughing with his online friends echoed through the hallway. I was handling a whole household, a full-time job of my own, and the special needs of a child whose brain worked differently. And I was doing all of this while also taking care of a grown man who refused to grow up. I was his maid. I was his cook. I was his personal helper and the person he took his bad feelings out on. I made sure he never ran out of toothpaste. I made sure his favorite shirts were always clean. I made sure the Great Dane was fed and all the appointments were kept. And what did I get in return? Nothing. No thank you. No, "I see how hard you are working." No respect. I lived in a state of quiet, burning anger for years. I was sure that my son was the reason for my suffering. I blamed the autism. I blamed the ADHD. I blamed the universe for giving me a child who was broken. But then, something changed. As my son entered high school, the storms began to calm down. The angry, unpredictable behavior that had defined his childhood started to become softer. He became someone I could finally talk to and reason with. He became someone who could explain his feelings with words instead of screaming them. And as the chaos of his childhood went away, the fog finally lifted from my eyes. I realized with a clearness that hit me like a physical blow that I did not hate being a mother. I did not hate my son. I hated my husband. This realization was as scary as it was freeing. My son was not the one who had made my life so terrible. He was just a child struggling with a brain that worked in a different way. The person who had truly failed me was the man sitting on the couch. He was not just no help, he was an active burden on my life. He was a second child, one who had the power and choice to help, but chose to watch me drown instead. He had watched me struggle for almost 2 decades and had not lifted one finger to make my load lighter. In fact, he had happily added more weight, expecting me to just deal with it because it was my job. It took me 18 and a half years to find my voice. It took almost 2 decades to understand that my son's childhood would have been a completely different experience for both of us if I had been with the man who actually cared about our well-being. If I had been with someone who offered a hand when they saw me stumbling, instead of a man who just watched me fall. So, I did the only thing I could do to save what was left of myself. I divorced that terrible man. Looking back now, I see the truth of those years. My son never knew how deep my suffering went. I protected him from it. I kept him safe from the anger I felt toward his father and the tiredness that almost destroyed me. To him, I made our lives look easy. He tells me now, as an adult, how much he admires how I handled everything. He calls me a Wonder Woman. And you know what? He is right. I was. I managed an entire household. I worked a demanding job. I raised a child with complex needs completely on my own while living under the same roof as a stranger. I managed the pets, the vacations, the money, and the emotional health of everyone except myself. I did it all because I had to, even when I was unhappy, even when I was breaking into pieces. Today, my life looks very different. The silence in my home is no longer the heavy, dark silence of a failing marriage. It is the peaceful silence of a woman who finally knows her own value. I do not regret my son, not for one single second. He is a brilliant, kind, and capable young man who has overcome so much. My only regret, the one that still hurts when I let myself think about it, is that I did not give him a better father. I regret that I stayed as long as I did, thinking that I was the problem, when the problem was the man who forgot that a marriage is a partnership, not a relationship between a master and a servant. I am not proud that I hated those years, but I am proud that I survived them. And I am proud that I finally had the courage to walk away from the man who made me feel like I was failing, when in truth, I was the only one holding the world together. Thanks for listening to my story. If you liked it, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment, and tell me where you're listening from.